Hello and welcome back to the Invest podcast. Isaac, it's been a while, man.
It absolutely has. We're back and ready to go.
Yeah, you're in a undisclosed location right now.
Absolutely nothing in the background giving away my location, hopefully.
Looks like an educational institution.
Looks like an institution of the utmost. So we'll see how we go. We're gonna power through this. I'm pretty excited though. It's been a while between conversations, but life sometimes gets on this grind, and Jack and I have had some commitments, and particularly myself. So we're back into it now, though.
Yeah, definitely long time coming. And I feel bad for all the viewers who were listening instead of watching, because I was just saying before when I saw you, that haircut, it looks great, man. That's my favorite one so far.
Yeah, I look like a bit of Michael Scott meets I don't know, Jim Halpert if anyone's watching The Office over there. But thank you, Nate. I'll shout out to my barber here locally. I just got the guy that gets it done.
What's his name?
I'm not sure. I got some other shout outs that I should give during the podcast, but yeah, I don't know his name, to be honest.
That's the thing for next week, man. Your thing for next week is learn that guy's name.
Yeah, I'm gonna get one next week. So
I'm keeping it fresh. That's good. But anyway, we digress. We're back. It's been a while. So obviously at the start of each podcast, or for the viewers who are new, listeners who are new, we discuss something that Isaac and I have learned or done or heard of or something in the past week, as we try to make this a weekly quick little podcast where we can learn and you guys can learn from us, and we can have this small community about investing in yourself and others, and just, a bit of self-improvement for yourself, but also to be a better person for others as well. So anyway, Isaac, you can start us off, man. What have you been doing as of late?
Yeah, well, I'll give a shout out to a guy called Martin, a friend of mine that I go to uni with, and he was discussing about how he likes the little things of the week. And this week I made a conscious effort to talk to strangers, talk to people that I just meet, right? Whether it's the shops, on a plane, which I have been in the past week, on on public transport, because I now catch the bus most days. Just have a conversation with someone. And I read a book a few years ago called Talking with Strangers. I think that's the title, something like that, by Malcolm Gladwell, and it talks about how speaking to people, talking to strangers, is an art in itself, right? Trying to connect with people, it's a skill, and through that, I've really learned, to try and find commonality with people. It's sometimes challenging, but sometimes it's really easy, and you can really strike up really enriching conversations. Whether you're talking about a movie you've seen or some music or whatever, you can always find common ground. But obviously, there's certain contexts where maybe you don't want to talk to people, but certainly I've found it's been really enriching to just talk to strangers. It kind of makes my day, and could make their day, and you just talk about anything, and it's just it's just common courtesy. But Jack, have you ever found yourself making a random friend as you're out and about?
Yeah, no, I love that. My favorite thing is to talk to people, random people, especially when you're out like shopping, like retail. I find that's really fun, especially because I used to work in retail, and it's definitely a simple conversation can make someone's day and turn someone's otherwise boring shift into an interesting thing. And that's how I actually ended up getting my retail job. Was I was talking to someone at the shop just to have some fun, and then ended up getting along, and then that got me that job. So I guess who knows. But my question for you, Isaac, is do you think that's actually changed your mindset? Because what stood out for me when you were talking about your experience talking with others, random people specifically, was that you're trying to find commonality. Like, do you feel like that has changed your mindset a bit? How when you approach someone you may not necessarily know or get along with, you try and establish that common ground? Do you feel like your mindset's changed a bit there?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to say, Jack, that I don't get social anxiety, so to speak, but I do. I always feel nervous, when you approach people, because you don't know how they'll react. And I think COVID has also made that more difficult, right? More people are less likely to respond to you. People are a bit more closed off. More people are wearing headphones, I notice, and masks on wherever they are. So there is barriers, but certainly finding the commonality, I think, has made me really realize that it's so important to have that human connection of a conversation, whether you are talking about the basics of what was the movie like you just watched, or the weather, or whatever it might be. It's really nice to have that human connection touch, and that's what it's made me realize, Jack, finding that commonality, that we're all existing in this society together, and for the most part, most people will respond to you and really are kind of pleasant to talk to. So that's good.
Really interesting, man. That's great to hear it. And I think for listeners out there who may have some social anxieties, or not social anxiety, like they've been diagnosed or anything of that nature, but even just in general, the overall sense of nervousness, especially with others. And I appreciate you mentioning those barriers because it definitely does feel like that. I think some people hopefully can relate to that, where they go out and they feel like, yeah, there's a bit of a disconnect between them and the outside world because of the things we've gone through in the past few years. So definitely breaking that down is great. And a lot of people that I've spoken to who have had jobs dealing with people in the public sector, maybe it's like waitressing, or maybe it's retail sales or something. When they've had to learn and they kind of have to talk to lots of people, they've always told me that that's the best thing for their confidence and their own self growth as a person, is to get used to talking to others. So that's amazing, man. I love
Yeah,
it.
exactly. It's a skill, Jack. Like, we're trying to cultivate skill, and that's what's investing in yourself and others. And a big part of that is testing. As you said, there's so many careers that you need to be able to communicate with people, right? But then communicating with strangers is another whole different ballgame, right? For you and I to communicate, it's very easy, Jack. We could just sit and talk about nothing, right? But to communicate with a stranger and have someone to sort of engage with you is much more difficult and requires your ability to sort of find commonality. So that's a skill. But Jack, tell me about what your thing of the week is.
Yeah, absolutely. My thing of the week is going to nicely transition into our topic for the week. So essentially, I've been doing a little bit of research into sleep because I've struggled in the past getting high quality sleep. And as I think it's pretty well known now that that has such an overwhelming effect on your overall everything, the way you are during the day, your ability to get things done, to focus, your health, your life, your longevity, everything. It's pretty fair to say that sleep is important to some extent, right? So I've been looking to how can I improve my sleep, and one of the things I looked into was how light affects your sleep, and there's more on that later. But my thing of the week is I'll try so hard to wind down, have dim lights, dark environment before sleep, but then I'll go to brush my teeth or wash my face, do whatnot before I go to bed, like a skincare routine, and I have the lights on the bathroom, and I'm awake again. I'm wired, right? Those lights wake me back up. So my way to combat that is I would actually put an external light on, perhaps like a hallway light or the closest light outside of my bathroom, and not put the bathroom light on and just leave the door open. And that way I can still see what I'm doing, but I'm not in that direct harsh light. And it seems like such a random thing, or just like, it's like the light's on. How does that work? But it's just such a dark environment, and you don't have to subject yourself to that harsh light before bed, like instantly before bed, after going through all that effort of being in a dark space. So that was my thing of the week. I just kind of, I'm sure others do it, but I kind of thought of that on my own. I'm sure it's a common thing, but yeah, that's really helped my sleep massively. Such a subtle change can really overhaul my sleep. So anyway, that was our topic, or that is our topic for this week. And that's how I kind of came up with this idea. And I'm speaking to a future doctor right now. So I got the pleasure of really delving deep, and I want to get into this now. And I want to get into a science-based discussion of how sleep works, how to improve your sleep, and all the things surrounding that. So man, how do you go with your sleep? Do you have anything that you do to help yourself?
I think it's do as I say, not do as I do, sort of a situation here. But yeah, I think sleep is one of those things where there is sleep medicine, and obviously medicine is involved. But I think people are starting to realize that there's so many aspects that we don't know about what happens when we sleep. There's still a lot to be researched and studied, and optimal regimes, and everyone's so different. So I think it's something where your own research and your own reading can really come into it. But Jack, the first thing I think of when I hear sleep is how many people in our society are sleep deprived. And I remember reading a book called Why We Sleep, and it was like almost 40% of the general population get less than 7 hours. Right? So that's a lot of people that don't sleep well, that are getting less sleep than what's typically advised. What's your response when you hear that? And do you find yourself ever going through weeks where you hear all your mates saying, "Oh, I barely slept," because I know you like your sleep and you will prioritize it.
Absolutely. I'll do anything to make sure I get my sleep in. Yeah. I hear that a lot with friends, and it's almost like a bit of a bragging, right? It's like, oh, I only slept 5, man. I only slept 4 hours. Like, it's so interesting, like the way that we try and one up each other in our society. And I understand sometimes it's like for the approval of others, or other times it's even just to make yourself feel better. I hear that a lot, where it's like, oh, I only got 4 hours, or yeah, I only got 5, and it's a bit of a competition, even with like, oh, I had like 10, I had like 10 drinks the other night. Like, people try and like almost like show off or flex, but it's over things that are not typically good for you. So perhaps it's maybe a way to, make themselves feel a certain way. But I guess I'm going out of scope here. in terms of the original thing that you were saying, like 40% of people get less than 7 hours. Man, that's why everyone's just pissed. Everyone's just angry. Like as a society, everyone's just pissed off. And I think if we
Yeah.
all got a bit more sleep, even like 1 hour for everyone would be great. If I had one wish from a genie, it'd just be like, everyone just get a little bit more sleep. That's crazy, man. Wow. So you read a book, Why We Sleep.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good read. Like I would recommend it. It is a bit more of a dry read. It's very much information based and to synthesize it all. But I remember reading that book, and it also suggested that sleep deprivation is a medical condition, right? It should be a medical condition that so many people go through, and it impacts so many aspects of their life. And to put it really simply, right, Jack, sleep deprivation when you're driving on the road is the same as being distracted by your phone or drinking alcohol. Like there's obviously that sort of campaign that's out there, and it's really important to have those power naps. But even translating to your day-to-day function, growth hormone is released when you sleep, right? So if you're training hard at the gym, or you're trying to be an athlete, that's important. And your overall brain function, your release of your stress hormones like cortisol is regulated by sleep. So you're going to feel more stressed and things during the day. And even your hunger hormones, I think ghrelin is the key hunger hormone, is impacted by your sleep cycle. So, all those things are going to be influenced when you're sleep depriving yourself. And that just results in all these other metabolic and health issues that are as a consequence of you just not getting the appropriate amount of sleep, or not, or not taking sleep seriously, just not making it a priority, perhaps. So it's a challenge. But Jack, what do you sort of think of in terms of the science of it? And obviously, if someone who trains and does prioritize sleep, how did you get yourself to do that?
Yeah, well, it's just I guess knowledge is power, right? Like the more you know, the better you can put yourself in a position to create sleep. And in fact, that's probably the biggest change for me, was just changing my mindset on how I approach sleep. Okay, so instead of viewing it as like I need to get this sleep, or I guess more commonly, I'm trying to get the sleep, like I'm trying to fall asleep. Instead of it making it about that, it was more I need to create the conditions for sleep. So instead of okay, I need to fall asleep, it's more what can I do to actually create an environment where I just will fall asleep naturally. And there were a lot of things I actually made notes, like on my own, just notes on my phone over the past few weeks as I learned about it, and to summarize things so I could remind myself and just briefly read over it. So I'll read out a couple main things if I can have the floor for like 5 minutes. So the first thing I wrote is about cortisol and adrenaline. Yeah. And as you mentioned, like cortisol is regulated by so many things. But yeah, sleep is one of them. And when you wake up in the morning, cortisol and adrenaline are released in the morning for the first few hours, like it kind of pulsates through your body. And essentially what that does is that sets a timer in your brain to release melatonin later in the day. So basically, when you wake up, cortisol, adrenaline released, it sets a timer for melatonin. So if you don't have a consistent sleep and wake cycle, what happens is you'll release cortisol and adrenaline perhaps too late in the day, and then you won't get melatonin early enough to fall asleep. Like your melatonin may be released later than when you actually go to bed. So therefore, you're not getting that melatonin you need to create sleep. And if I can continue, one main thing that actually releases that cortisol and adrenaline is morning sunlight, like specifically morning sunlight. So basically there's a group of cells in your eyes that can detect like low angle sunlight. So that is specifically used to actually, for your body to know that it's the morning. And this communicates to the central clock in your brain, sets your circadian rhythm, as I think a lot of people know. So that's why it's advised to go outside in the morning. Even just getting light through a window is okay, but it's much more effective to go outside. I've heard somewhere 50 times more effective being outside rather than just through a window. So that's a lot of main things that I've heard about. But actually, one key thing that people do that Isaac, you're great at avoiding is alcohol, because that actually fragments your sleep. Like it's interesting because it is a depressant. So people get relaxed and they feel like that helps them sleep, but no, it fragments it. So you don't get your cycles, you don't get your REM sleep, and you don't get your growth hormone, as you were saying. So, mate, well done to you for not getting into that. Do people know that you don't drink?
Yeah, I think my friends are not sure if the general population would, and that's more of a choice not based on sleep, but many other factors of sobriety. But I just want to focus in on that, Jack, especially that early light exposure. And I've actually tried that before. Maybe that can be my thing of the week another time. But I've really started doing it, and I've noticed that has made a big influence on me. Not really from just going to sleep, but actually awakening for the day, like just getting alive and awake for the day. Right. I don't necessarily think of it as in the night, but what's going to be a consequence, 12 hours later, but in the morning, it just gets me up and going to also have that. And sometimes I can't walk outside and go and get it myself, but even at the window, just standing at the window, and I know you've mentioned that previously as well. But what about, Jack, this idea of sleep hygiene? I'm not sure if you've heard of it, having a sleep routine. What do you sort of feel about that? And have you sort of got a set routine?
Yeah, I think the term sleep hygiene is good because it kind of creates this idea that you need to, it's a part of your health, it's a part of your cleanliness or something as a person where it's something you have
Mm,
to do. Because when I think of sleep hygiene, I think of like general hygiene, like brushing your teeth, showering, skincare, the things that you do every day that you make initially a conscious effort to set up and then now becomes a bit of a habit. We need to do that with sleep too. So yes, absolutely. If that's what gets people going in terms of setting something up for themselves, absolutely. And yeah, to sum it up, mine is that morning light. I'll go outside every single morning, even if it's raining. I'll just sit under cover if I can. Yeah, I'll be outside. I'll always have my breakfast outside, coffee outside, and then at night, yeah, making sure that I'm not being exposed to super bright light. Obviously, you want to avoid blue light. Everyone's got the blue light filters. Like by now, everyone's got like blue light glasses or maybe like that filter on your phone. But just any light should just be avoided if
mm,
possible. Keeping things dark and going straight to bed. Try not to go on your phone because that light may trigger that part of your brain through neurons and will actually release that adrenaline and cortisol in a small amount, but it kind of mimics what you would get in the morning that gets you awake. So you don't want that at night because you actually would rather that melatonin instead. So yeah, that's a main thing. And one thing I want to mention on the sleep hygiene, because we always think morning and night. What about during the day, right? Like people have coffee
mm,
way too late, I think, way too late because
yeah, I
that
agree.
caffeine, it binds to your adenosine receptors and then you're not going to actually feel tired by the end of the day because that buildup of adenosine that you need to feel tired by the end of the day, it's just blocked. It's just gone with the caffeine binds to it. And as you know, Isaac, caffeine's got a half-life of what, 6 hours, so a quarter life of about 12. So you want at least 12
Mm,
hours before
mm,
sleep, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to echo that as well. Like it it really starts. A good night's sleep starts early in the day. It doesn't just start, an hour before or 30 minutes. Now that last 30 minutes can be very beneficial, right? Putting your phone away, like Jack said, perhaps, unwinding through stretching, meditation, whatever it is that you would like to add. Just find a small routine, like even if it is, okay, after 1 p.m. or after lunch, I'm not going to have any caffeine or any stimulants, right? And, now before bed, I'll put my phone on my desk rather than having it next to me in bed or something like that. And I myself need to get better at the phone thing as well. So this is good accountability for me. But I also wanted to add, Jack, an interesting thing I've read is that it's better to, if you're not able to fall asleep, to get up and like read in low light or do something than it is just to toss and turn and wait and get more anxious about, like, go through a cycle of why aren't I falling asleep? Just just say, okay, I'm not falling, accept it and do something else. Because it'll not only increase your productivity because you're going to read or do something else, but also you're actually more likely to fall asleep anyway, rather than turning, tossing, creating all this motion. Um, so yeah, I think that's important. But what's something, Jack, that you think that if we want to start a routine, where should they start with? What should they start with? What resource could they go to, or maybe what could they just one step to start tonight?
Yeah, well, I think there's so many things we can do, and when it comes to where do you start or resource, I mean, not always the most reliable thing, but just Google, YouTube, you know, as long as it's from a decent source. I'm not a doctor, so maybe I'm not the best source to be honest, but someone who is qualified or maybe understands it really well. Yeah, look into anything that will improve your sleep that seems easy to you. Like for example, to me, something like going outside in the morning seems really easy to me because I'm like, well, I have breakfast and coffee anyway. I may as well have that outside. That works for me. But for someone else, maybe that's actually really hard. And for them, maybe it's just avoiding coffee before, like 12 hours or something before bed is easier for them because they actually work earlier in the morning. They don't need caffeine later. Like I work later in the day. So sometimes I feel like I need that caffeine, unfortunately, to get that done. So I think it's look at what the research says around sleep and how to improve it, and do the things that makes more sense to you, and slowly build it up. I think in general, when it comes to improving parts of our life, instead of trying to do everything at once, and I'm just going to be some like insane perfect human being, let's just try one thing and see how we go, and you can build it up from there. Um, so yeah, just do the thing that makes most sense to you. But I will say I am biased, because light is the only thing that has that direct connection through neurons to your circadian rhythm. Light is probably the most powerful thing. So please keep that in mind when it comes to the morning and the night. Light will really will help you, as in the intake of light. So yeah, those are my thoughts on sleep, and pretty much everything I understand at this point. But yeah, definitely employ everyone to do their own research, because I'm just some guy with my mate doing a podcast. So, but what about you, man? What would you recommend to people who want to improve their sleep? And maybe it's something that you've done yourself.
You could also look at something like the Sleep Foundation, and they've got a lot of good resources as well. But mate, I might let you wrap it up if you want.
Yeah, no problem, man. No problem. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this week. Please stay up to date with things, and don't be afraid to chuck us a DM if you want some suggestions for future episodes. But just to do the wrap up, I know Isaac's really good at this, so I always get a bit nervous when I got to do it myself. But he mentioned that his thing of the week was talking to strangers, changing his mindset, and trying to find that common ground, and actually connect with others, and kind of pull down that thin veil that we've seen nowadays with the way society is, and trying to connect with people. And with me, I've just looked at my sleep and thought, how can I improve it? And I decided to not be under the bright light in the bathroom before bed, and instead use a hallway light or something. And that kind of led us into our topic of the week, which I was very passionate about. So I definitely pushed that a lot. But it was really good to hear Isaac's point of view as well. And obviously he definitely understands a lot of research better than me, so it was good to hear his perspective as well. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll hear from you in the next podcast. See ya.